we have to deal with the following things over the next 3 weeks. Nominations, year-end funding, the Saudi-Yemen issue. We'll have a briefing tomorrow, the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense. And then there's some effort on behalf of some of our members to trigger a vote on a resolution related to the War Powers Act. We also just had an extensive discussion of criminal justice in our conference, and both those who believe we should go forward with the bill this year and those who think we should not. And as I indicated earlier, we'll be whipping that to see whether what the consensus is, if there is a consensus in our conference about not only the substance but the timing of moving forward with that particular piece of legislation.
Well, before we leave, we do have to pass a appropriation bill to fund border security and the Department of Homeland Security. And our Democratic colleagues seem to come up with a lot of criticism but have no answer when you ask the question, what are we supposed to do about people breaking through barricades, mobs of people, and coming into our country illegally and not following the rules? They have absolutely no answer whatsoever. I think part of the problem is because they look at this like they're looking through a soda straw. They look at what's happening in Tijuana, but they don't see the bigger picture, which is the drug cartels and the transnational criminal organizations that are commodity agnostic. In other words, they don't care who they hurt, who dies in the process, how much poison they import in the United States in terms of illegal drugs. All they're worried about is making money. All you need to do is look at some of the testimony in the New York trial of El Chapo, head of one of the large drug cartels, to see exactly the kinds of businesses that they engage in strictly from a profit motive. So I think we need to look at this from the standpoint of working with Mexico and Central America to try to address this issue. There's a lot of problems, obviously, in Central America that people are fleeing. I do want to express my appreciation to Secretary Nielsen, Secretary Pompeo, and the Trump administration for negotiating toward an arrangement whereby people who seek asylum in the United States can wait while their claim is being adjudicated in Mexico. That represents a sea change in our relationship with Mexico and a recognition that this is a problem we need to solve together. And I think it's good news. Of course, the best solution would be a bipartisan fix of what's broken in our immigration system. That's been rejected out of hand by our Democratic colleagues, and that's regrettable. But in the meantime, I'm glad that the administration is working to try to address this humanitarian crisis. That's what Barack Obama called it a couple of years ago, and that's what the mayor of Tijuana calls it today, to try to address this situation.
At the start of the 115th Congress, Republicans in the Senate had one goal in mind, and that was to make life better for the American people. And so we set about putting major policy initiatives on the Senate floor, getting them enacted, signed into law, historic tax reform, lifting regulatory burdens, preparing our young people for the workforce, strengthening our national security, historic VA reforms, all things that we believe led to a record of legislative accomplishment in the last couple of years that we haven't seen around here in a really long time. And I think a lot of people believe now, I mean, I hear it articulated all the time that now that we're in a time of divided government, that somehow that's going to spell the end of legislative accomplishment. And I'm just here to say it doesn't have to be that way. If you look at throughout our history, in times of divided government, there have been some of the most consequential legislative accomplishments that we've seen, from Social Security reform in 1983 under President Reagan, historic tax reforms in 1986, again under President Reagan with a Democrat House, 1996, welfare reform, Democrat President, Republican Congress, 1997, balanced budget agreement, 2012, making the tax cuts permanent, the Bush tax cuts permanent, and of course in 2014, historic VA reforms. All happened at a time of divided government. And we have demonstrated in the past, and Republicans here in the Senate in the last couple of years have demonstrated, as we have passed major legislation with big bipartisan margins, that we can get things done with divided government. The question is whether the Democrats are going to be willing to join us or whether they're going to be more interested in relitigating the 2016 presidential election. And I hope it is the former, that they will look for ways to work with us in a constructive way to make the lives of working families in this country better. That is what is going to continue to be the focus of Republicans here in the United States Senate.
I spent Thanksgiving, as I do every year, visiting the troops overseas and thanking them for what they do to keep us safe and keep us free, visiting with Wyoming soldiers. And this year I went to northern Poland, near the Poland-Russia border, near Kaliningrad, where Vladimir Putin is increasing his nuclear weapon force. This group, and it's a NATO group, Americans along with British, Poles, there are a number of countries there, all as a deterrence to what Russia is doing. And you see the importance of a deterrence when you take a look at the last 48 hours and the importance of a deterrence when you see what Russia has done with regard to Ukraine and blocking and firing on ships, just moving product from one port in Ukraine to another. This is the sole responsibility of Vladimir Putin. I believe the U.S. response so far has been inadequate, that direct threats require decisive action. President Trump will be at the G20 in Buenos Aires. Apparently Vladimir Putin is going to be there as well. I think it's important for President Trump to tell Vladimir Putin that this behavior is absolutely outlandish, but Putin respects action, not words. So I think we need to do more. I think we need to move ships into the Black Sea and do it quickly. And by doing it quickly, that sends the message to our allies in Ukraine that we are with them, and to Russia as well, that international law must be followed.
Go ahead. Oh, okay. Great. Thanks. A few weeks ago, you blocked Senator Flake from trying to call up a bill to protect Special Counsel Robert Mueller. We've heard your web say that you might be interested in it, we were working on that. Would you block them again? Because they've talked about going to the floor and trying to call that bill up again tomorrow.
Well, I think you know my view. This is a solution in search of a problem. The president's not going to fire Robert Mueller, nor do I think he should, nor do I think he should not be allowed to finish. We have a lot of things to do to try to finish up this year without taking votes on things that are completely irrelevant to outcomes.
But would you repeat what you did and object if they ask unanimous consent to bring that bill to the floor tomorrow like they did?
I probably would, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Senator McConnell, do you believe that Saudi Arabia should be punished in any way for its role in killing of Jamal Khashoggi and particularly the Crown Prince?
Yeah, I mean, what obviously happened, as basically certified by the CIA, is completely abhorrent to everything the United States holds dear and stands for in the world. So some kind of response to that certainly would be in order, and we're discussing what the appropriate response should be. It's always been a kind of a pragmatic relationship, regardless of who's been in the White House. We value their opposition to the Iranians, and I think almost no one believes we should completely and totally fracture our relationship with the Saudis. But yes, some kind of response is going to be appropriate, and we're going to continue to talk about that.
Should Haspel brief you guys tomorrow?
Thank you, Mr. Leader. The president seems determined to get $5 billion for the border wall in the year-end spending bill. What can you offer Democrats to get them to agree to that figure? Well,
we're talking about it. We're trying to get the president the money he would like for the wall. That's part of the year-end funding discussion, which is ongoing, not only among the appropriators, but with the administration as well. And we're hoping that's one of the many things we've got to wrap up here at the end of the year.
There are reports that you instructed Major League Baseball's fundraising arm to donate to Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith. Is this true, and does she deserve to retain her Senate seat given her comments around lynching?
I've had no discussions about donors to that campaign with anyone. It's certainly my hope that Senator Hyde-Smith will be elected today in Mississippi.
What about her comments about lynching?
I've had no discussions about any of the donations to the campaign.
So you're declining to comment about Cindy Hyde-Smith's comments about public hanging. Do you think she should have apologized in a more fulsome way?
You know, I don't have any observations to make about that. The people of Mississippi are making a judgment today about who they would like to represent them in the Senate. And that's the way it works in this country. Senators are from particular states, and all of these issues have been fully discussed all over the state of Mississippi, and we'll have a verdict, an outcome tonight. Thanks a lot.